Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a line in the Ruy Lopez that it's this is a great line if you play the closed Ruy Lopez. It's a great surprise weapon that you know you can get a lot of quick wins or quick advantages, quick early advantages. Get an early checkmate, win a queen early on. Um, and even if your opponent knows how to refute it, you still have a pretty nice position. So it's called the Steiner variation, and it arises from the martial attack. So if we just have a look here at the moves, we have the Ruy Lopez. This is the Ruy Lopez. And then if we go a little further on, we have the closed Ruy Lopez, characterized by this Bishop E7 move. And if we just follow the mainline moves here, castles C3, and now black here has an option to go either D4, D5 or D6. Those are basically black's two options. D5 is the martial attack, which is the most aggressive line in the closed Ruy Lopez, and probably it's also the most popular line at like the club and amateur level. So this is what I would recommend playing. I would recommend playing D5. It also scores very well for black. And then white actually, there are a couple of sideline moves here, D3 and D4, but they're very rarely played. Less than 5% of the time they've been played. But the main move is E captures D5, and then the mainline martial attack goes with this move, Knight takes D5. But this is the surprise weapon. It's called the Steiner variation. On move 9, you play the move E4. And this trap is great. It's not a trap. It's just a line. Well, it's a trappy line, actually. But, if we just look at the win percentages over here, white's only winning, 30% of games after the move E4. Black's winning 60% of games. That's really good. That's a really good win percentage for a mainline variation only on move 9. Like this is some mainline Ruy Lopez stuff. And I'm using the Lichess expert database, so 2,000 plus rated games only. And no bullet games. So 68%, what was it? 63% win rate in 2,000 plus rated games. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I actually got this line in a game just this morning. It was like 20 hours ago I played it. And I beat a 2150 in like 18 moves. In a rapid game. It wasn't even a blitz game. It was a rapid game. So you will definitely catch people off guard with this, and you'll get some quick wins. So okay, this is the Steiner variation. If you do play this martial attack, though, there are some moves you got to be aware of. So after this move, castles, the main line move here is C3, and that goes into the martial attack, and also, black can play the Chigorian Defense with D6. But there are some deviations that white can play here, and sometimes white doesn't like going into the martial attack because it's really tricky to play against as white. So here white has tried some other moves other than C3 to avoid going into the martial attack, and it's just important to be aware of these moves. You might see these moves if you get to this position instead of C3. So against H3, for example, I would recommend just going D6, so defending your pawn, and then now white plays C3 here, and D5 isn't as effective for a multitude of reasons. The lines just don't work with this h3, and also, you know, you don't want to lose a tempo. You just move this pawn. So after this, I'd recommend playing knight a5 and bishop c2 and c5, and this is the Chigorian defense. And I would recommend studying this so you know how to play this as black. There is this really nice book that I'm reading right now. It's called the Chigorian Bible. I forget who it's by, but if you just look it up, it's a very nice book on the Chigorian defense. And then there's these other moves, you know, d4, a4. I'd recommend looking at those too, but I'm not going to cover them in this video. It's just important to be aware of them. So now we're going to look at some of the main lines in the Steiner variation. So we have our position here. The martial attack, e cross d5, and the Steiner variation begins with move e4. And so the main move here is d cross c6 and e cross f3. But there is this sideline move, which is knight g5. And against this, I'm recommending you play knight a5. And here 2 moves have been tried. So the first is white simply regains the pawn, and that's the correct move. And then the mistake move, which is very tempting. A lot of white players might play this because they want to hold on to their bishop pair. It's a very common idea in the Ruy Lopez, which is bishop c2. It's also the reason why they played c3. And this is actually a blunder because of the move knight g4. And okay, so we're threatening the knight has to take here, and now we play f5. The knight, where can the knight go? The knight only has 1 square. It can only play to g3, and now we play bishop d6, and we're planning to play queen h4, and the attack on the king is going to be really strong in this line. And it's going to be really hard for white to defend because they can't play this g3 move because their knight's on g3. So I think if you turn on the computer, this is already like -3 for black or something. So that's bishop c2. If, on the other hand, white captures this pawn, then we're simply gonna take this bishop right here, and after a few exchanges, you know, black's down a pawn, but the bishop pair and also their lead in development is going to lead to a game with chances for both sides. So this is definitely playable from both sides. Alright, that's knight g5. Now let's look at the main line, which starts after d cross c6. We're going to play e cross f6. And here, 2 moves have been tried. So the most common move by far is queen takes f3. And this goes into like a really trappy line. White really needs to know what they're doing after this if they don't want to lose material. And even then, it's still going to lead to a tricky endgame, even if white plays perfectly. So for that reason, a lot of theory, a lot of books don't recommend queen takes f3. The theoretical refutation to this line is d4. And simply after f cross g2, queen f3, a5, queen takes g2, and bishop f5, we kind of have the same deal. You know, black is down a pawn, but their lead in development, and also this hole in white's king side can lead to a game with chances for both sides. And Stockfish evaluates this position as 0.0. So, yeah, this is kind of the theoretical refutation. But like I said, it still leads to a game with chances for both sides. So it's a playable opening, you know, it's playable. But now I want to look at this move, queen takes f3. And if we look at the opening database, you know, before we were looking just at like the main variation, you know, this position, I was saying black has like a 63% win rate after this position. Well, if we go just a couple moves further, after queen takes f3, we've already gone up to 70%. Black is winning 70% of the time in expert level games from this position. So you can tell it's a really strong opening. And here, as you can see by the arrow, we're going to play the move bishop g4. And here 2 moves have been tried, queen g3 or queen e3. Queen f4 is also possible, but it has been played very rarely, less than 5% of the time, and it's just because it just doesn't look like a very good move, because queen f4 and simply bishop d6, and you're not going to be able to. You have to move the queen again. It doesn't look. It's like, why would you play queen f4 when you can play queen g3? So I'm not going to go over queen f4, but it's still very good for black. I think black is actually much better still after queen f4, but it's not worth memorizing the lines just because it's going to be played so rarely. But the 2 critical moves are queen g3 and queen e3. And as you can see, queen e3 is the blunder here. And at the 2000 level, with the opening database I'm using, these moves have actually been played the same amount of times, basically. They've both been played like 2,000 times. So your opponent has basically a 50% chance of blundering queen e3 here, because it doesn't look like a blunder. Look at this. How is black winning in this position? Well, you can see because of the arrow. But even after this rook e8 move, it's hard to see how black is winning. You say, okay, black has this lead in development for being down 2 pawns, but you might think, there's not really an attack. White can survive. But no, black is actually completely winning here. Simply after the move rook e8. Here 2 moves have been tried. d4 is much more common than this other move f3, but f3 was still common enough I wanted to include it. We simply pin this queen here, so we're threatening to take, obviously, and then queen takes c5 is the only move. This actually leads to checkmate. So I think here in this position, I think the best move is d4, but who's going to play d4? Yeah, I think the best move when I was looking at this with the computer is d4, and you just sack the queen for, you're going to get a rook and a bishop for it. But who's going to play d4 when you can take this free bishop? And even if white sacks the queen for a rook and a bishop, that's still winning for black. So this line actually leads to mate here. Rook takes e1, king f2, and now we have knight e4. And this is actually mate in 13. If black takes the rook, obviously then we just take the queen, and you don't even need to see the checkmate because you're up a queen. But if black takes the knight to save their queen, now it's actually a mate in 3. Simply queen h4, g3 is the only move, queen takes h2, king takes e1 is the only move, and queen e2 is checkmate. So that's a very nice way you can get a quick checkmate if your opponent plays f3. But much more likely here they're going to play d4. It's been played in basically 100% of the games. And here we simply play bishop d6. Kind of a quiet move, except there is this discovered attack on the queen. The queen can't move to like d3, for example, because you'd hang your rook. So there's only one move here. That's queen d2. And now we have this deflection tactic, which is bishop f4. And 2 moves have been tried here. The most common move, rook takes e8, is a blunder. The idea is your queen can't stay connected to your rook, so first you trade your rook, and then you can move your queen, and everything will be fine. That's the idea with rook takes e8. But it doesn't work because if we just look at this right here, rook takes e8, black only has 2 legal moves, but who's going to play knight takes e8 here? Queen takes e8 because you're threatening queen e1, and it's kind of a problem for white because white needs to stay connected, defend their back rank, but the queen doesn't have any squares to do that. The only square that defends is queen d3, and now when the queen checks, we can block with the queen. And then comes bishop takes h2. Deflecting the king, and you know, white's going to be down a queen, black's going to be up a queen. This is just completely winning for black. So white can't play rook takes e8 here. It's got to play rook e3 to guard the queen. And here you could just play bishop takes e3 and be up the exchange. But queen d6, I found, leads to a very strong attack. And so, you know, you don't need to take this rook immediately. It's pinned to the queen. So this just leads to a very pleasant attack on the white king. And you can continue your game from here. Black is totally winning here. So that's why queen e3 is a blunder. So here white's got to play queen g3. And we're going to continue with our same move, bishop d6. Here two moves have been tried. So you're attacking the queen, and there's only two moves really, f4 and queen h4. They're both playable moves. Queen h4 has been played much more often though. But just if they do play f4, you simply play rook e8, and here basically the only move that's been played is d4, you know, grabbing the center, allowing your bishop to develop. You just play knight h5, and it's an equal game. Well, you know, it's not equal in terms of material, but you know, black has compensation, so it's equal with compensation. So that's what you do after f4. But the main move you're going to see more likely is queen h4. Here you're going to play rook e8, so you're threatening back rank checkmate. Once again, here rook takes e8 is a massive blunder. So once again, you're threatening this back rank checkmate. f3 has to be played so the queen defends. But now queen e2, and there's some, you know, bishop h3 ideas here, and you know, you can bring the other rook in. I think if you turn on the computer here, this is like -10. Black, I think, is gonna white is gonna have to give up a lot of material here to stop the checkmate. So once again, rook takes e8 doesn't work here. Rook e3 has also been played, but it's not the main move. Here you just play bishop f4. This rook cannot move because otherwise you get checkmated, and you can just win the exchange and be up the exchange, and this is good for black, obviously. So you're going to win the exchange if they play rook e3. That's why here the main move is f3. So the queen defending the rook and also attacking the light squared bishop. Bishop f5 is the main move. And then here d4, it's been played in 100% of the games. You know, grabbing the center, looking to develop your bishop. It's just the most natural move ever. And here we have this incredible piece sacrifice. Bishop takes h2, check. And here black has 5 legal moves, but 4 of them lose instantly. So white has to take this bishop with his king. We'll just go through the other 4 moves here. The most obviously losing move is queen takes h2. Simply rook takes e1, and you're going to be up a whole rook in this position. And so this is just completely winning for black. Let's look at king f1. King f1, we simply play bishop d3, and after king f2, you know, you can't play rook e2 because it just loses a rook. Now you trade the rook. After the king recaptures, you play queen e1, and how do you stop that checkmate on e2? I think this is actually a mate in 7 if you turn on the engine. So this is just completely winning for black, obviously. It's checkmate. So you can't play king f1. King f2, it's not a very good move because of there's this same rook takes e1 trick. It's also possible, but something like it, I think actually it's actually not the same because the bishop's not on d3. But simply knight g4 here is just automatically winning, checking, and also discovered attack on the queen. The king can't come to g3 to defend the queen, so this is just going to be winning after queen takes and bishop takes. You know, black has two minor pieces, or black has the queen for two minor pieces, so you know this is obviously just winning for black. So that's king f2. You can't play king f2. And then the two most common moves, save them for last, I guess. I don't know why I did that. But king h1, the most common blunder, been played in about 25% of games. Here you simply play queen d6. And now you have a lot of ideas with rook takes e1 and bishop g3, also very hard to stop. So this is just going to be very nice for black. So in conclusion, this bishop has to be accepted. And then we play knight g4. Once again, we're discovered attack on the queen. So you can't take the knight, you have to bring the king up. Actually, you know, taking the knight with the queen is possible. White will get three minor pieces for the queen, and it leads to a very weird imbalance. But with the white king not having that great of safety, it's probably better for black to have the queen. And also just, you know, white's stunted piece development. It's not very good. So queen takes g4, probably playable for white here, though it's also going to be very tricky for them. So, you know, king g3 is the main move. Here you simply trade queens, and you eat the free rook. White eats your knight, you eat their bishop. White eats your bishop. And here, white has a pawn and two pieces for the rook, but they're going to have a lot of trouble developing their queen side, you know, with this really annoying pin. Stockfish evaluates this position actually as minus 0.4, and this position is just very pleasant for black to play overall. So I think those are all the lines that I wanted to explore. Now that I've done that, I don't think I missed any lines. There is this game that Bobby Fischer played against Sidney Bernstein in 1959 that I'd like to go through. So we have our line, the Ruy Lopez closed variation, and we have this Marshall attack. And remember, this was 1959, so Bobby Fischer wasn't world champion yet, but he was still a very good chess player. And also, this was probably a novel line back then too. I'm not exactly sure when it was first played, but you know, it's very unknown today, so I'm sure it was still very unknown in 1959 too. So Bernstein plays this move, e4. And you know, Bobby Fischer accepts the piece sacrifice. He goes for this queen takes f3 variation. You know, this d4 theoretical move hadn't been found yet. And we have this main line which I've covered, which is bishop g4, you know, queen g3, bishop d6, queen h4, and rook e8, f3, queen defending the rook, bishop f5. d4, and now we have this bishop takes h2 sacrifice, which is considered the best move, so Bernstein found the best move. King takes h2, knight g4 check, queen g3, queen takes h4, and Bobby Fischer goes into this line that we've just looked at. And this was the final position we looked at in the study. So here Bernstein played rook d8, which is an inaccuracy. So the computer and also modern theory suggests here you should play king f8. And I think the idea is to play like f6 and rook e8. I think that's the idea. But Bernstein played rook d8, and I think his idea here is, in order for white to develop these two pieces, first the bishop has to defend the knight, and the bishop can't do it on a2 because it blocks the rook from going out. So the bishop is going to have to come somewhere on this diagonal not that diagonal, but this diagonal. And so I think Bernstein's idea here is to stop the bishop from coming to d5, then to e4 to defend the knight. I think that's his idea here. But it's actually in inaccuracy here. So Fischer continues with a4, trying to get some counterplay on the queen side. And Bernstein plays b4. Fischer continues with d5. And here Bernstein plays rook b8, defending his pawn. But this is actually a mistake. This is a critical mistake. He should have played b takes c3 here, and this would have kept the game equal. So b takes c3 and a5, and white doesn't have a lot of counterplay on the queen side here. It's still going to be very tough for white to develop the pieces too. So yeah, this would have kept the game equal. But instead, Bernstein plays this mistake, rook b8. The game continues d6, so white is trying to create a passed pawn. C takes d6, bishop c4, so attacking the a pawn, maybe also looking to come to d3 to have the rook escape. Bernstein plays rook c8, attacking the c pawn, and the players trade pawns. And now Fischer plays bishop b5, counterattacking the rook, and here comes Bernstein's second big mistake of the game. He plays rook b6. This is a mistake. You'll see why from the line that ensued in the game. But here Bernstein needed to play b takes c3, so sacrificing his rook. And now not c takes b2, but instead c2, simply attacking the pinned knight. And then obviously, you can't allow this capture in the queen, so you have to play knight a3. And then this is still much better for white, obviously. Rook a2, knight e3, and rook takes b2. This is still better for white, most likely, but black has much better drawing chances here than what happened in the game. So what happened in the game, instead of this b takes c3 move, Bernstein played rook b6, and now Fischer's pawns are just going to be too strong. So white plays c4, black plays d5, now we have a5, and these passed pawns are just going to be too much now after this. So Bernstein kind of goes for a cheap trick. He goes for g5, and his hope is that Fischer captures en passant and allows this rook takes g6, and now the white king is most likely going to be mated. I think you have to sack the rook or something here. This is like -5 if you turn on the computer. So it's very good for black. Fischer didn't take like that, though. He simply took with the king, and now black's rook is still attacked, but Bernstein throws in another check, h6, king g4. Now he finally saves his rook. Fischer plays the move a6. So this pawn is just looking to become a queen. D cross c4, a7. You have to block the pawn. So rook a8, and now bishop c6. So this pawn is going to become a queen if you move this rook. So instead, black sacrifices his rook. Actually, first he throws in a check, throws in this move h5. White can actually take this pawn here, but Fischer decided just to keep his king safely behind his g-pawn, so there's no checks from behind. And now Bernstein has to sack his rook for this knight, deflecting the white rook off of the file. So rook takes b1, rook takes b1, rook takes a7, and now white's just up a piece. After a couple more moves, rook c1, rook a2, rook takes c4, rook takes b2, and f6. Here Bernstein resigned because he's down a piece, and he's actually going to get mated here soon. It's going to be really hard for Bernstein to stop this kind of mating idea here. So that's a cool game in the Steiner variation. If you're a Ruy Lopez player as white, it's good to be aware of this. You should definitely be aware of it. And if you're playing it as black, well, now you know a really nice tricky line you can use in Blitz, Bullet, maybe even some Rapid or USCF or FIDE rated games. I think all of the resulting positions are playable. It, uh, in a some positions are obviously better for white, but it might be worth the risk depending on your rating. It just it's all up to, it's kind of a personal choice. Do you want to take that risk of potentially being in a slightly worse position, or getting a really quick win? So that is it. That's my trick against the Ruy Lopez as black, the Steiner variation. I don't think I have anything else to say. So thank you all for watching. Be sure to check me out on Twitch. Give this video a like if you liked it, and subscribe, I guess. I don't know. And I'll see you next time.